Now, next is Srimati Seema Chishti. She will come online now. Seema, most welcome to this seminar.
Sorry, I had not, media is doing a lot of self-censoring, so I had forgotten to unmute myself. So I just wanted to first say that I'm feeling very sorry for myself sitting in an AQI of 500, where I could have been there in the beautiful state of Kerala. My apologies for not being there and being online, but thank you, Keraleeyam, for inviting me on this very important session on such an important subject, which is critical to our democracy, and if I may say, to also India's future in what we know, in our information, and how we see ourselves and the world. So a lot of what I've said has already been said by my very eminent kind of seniors and colleagues before me, but I'll just try and put some things in perspective and share some of my thoughts with you on how the whole media environment, this entire information soup that we find ourselves swimming in, is shaping up and its implications for democracy. I think first things first, just to get the scale of the beast is very important. I'm quoting figures from 2017. These are the registrar of newspapers and the TRI figures. There are 825 registered television channels. There are 80,000 newspapers. There are 324/7 channels in 16 languages. So that's the scale of people we have. That's the kind of information we have. We should be the super democracy right now. So that's when you contrast it with being 161st out of 180 countries on the World Press Freedom Index. It comes as a shock. But I think that's our job as people who are swimming in this time, who are condemned to try and analyze it as we're living through it, to try and make sense of it. So I have about 3 points to make. My first point is that, of course, from 2014 onwards, it's been an absolutely scary ride. And there seems to be no end to where this is going. There's like a deep, dark side, if not a whirlpool, at the end of this stream. But I think it's important for all of us who critique the past 10 years to actually accept what was happening before 2014. So I think in that lies the kind of the strength of our argument when we talk about what changed after 2014. I think we must completely understand that the state of Indian media was not healthy before we were hit by a very powerful government, which intends to use every ounce and every inch of its power. This is it became very clear after the 1990s when you have the commodification of news. You had paid news before Mr. Modi came on the scene before 2014. You have what media analysts have called the 3 Cs, that is crime, cinema, and cricket, just having kind of morphed the whole space to become some kind of entertainment and infotainment. So you have crime shows, you have cricket being seen like you cover Amitabh Bachchan or Shah Rukh Khan. You have an obsession with particularly Bollywood, but other cinema also. All that being kind of confused with the real job of a journalist of informing people. And people like Amartya Sen and Jean Drèze did a very good study of that, where they tried to find how much of hunger or issues that matter were actually put down. They actually pulled down the numbers, which I don't have right now on me, about how limited the study of all of that was and the attention paid to that was. So it was not as if everything was hunky-dory before that. But I think what happens after, say, 2012 or so, with the advent of the smartphone and cheap data, etc., is that the whole scenario changes so dramatically that you kind of just walk into a crisis waiting to be kind of ordered about by a super strong executive which wants to run the media as it thinks media should be run. And media then actually, of course, honorable exceptions, that's understood. There are honorable exceptions here. There are several honorable exceptions on the stage. All of them are. But basically, media becomes a full-fledged arm of the government propaganda machine. And I think what happens is, again, fourfold. One is the severe hit that the economy takes. So the ability of media to do those supplements, to have that extra money that you put into coverage, all that experiences a huge squeeze after 2008. The second thing that happens is that the legacy media, the traditional print model, is broken because of technology. Technology, the whole advent of social media, the citizen as journalist, other things like that, but bring the whole question of why do you need Seema, why do you need Venu, why do you need Ulek or John or anyone? We'll answer ourselves. That whole model throws the whole economy of media to the dogs. It really takes it there. And therefore, it kind of makes them super dependent on government ads. So by the time you have 2014, you have technology, the economic collapse, the collapse of the legacy model. And to that, of course, you have the fourth very important component, which was kind of hidden earlier, but comes to the fore. And that is of ideological inclinations of those who held power. And this is something that was kind of in the making for a long time. This is in the making probably from the 70s onwards of media houses, which now finally feel confident about coming out. There's lots of data and studies on that, but the most recent is the CSDS study, which studied journalists. And journalists themselves said, I think three-fourths said that it seemed as if their media houses favored just one political party. So the mix, this very toxic mix of ideology, technology, the economic collapse, and the need for government ads just pushes media into the arms of a super powerful executive. That's the kind of scenario which we should not forget. And this is something I think Ulek mentioned it, Venu mentioned it, and others did too. The importance of media and information to democracy was critical, and that is why it compromises democracy. Because, if I'm like a model, or if I'm a worker, I'm a farmer, or I'm a carpenter, I don't have the time to go into all the minutiae of the news, etc. I just look at headlines and I go to work. I'm not. So the headline management, media in the sense really informs the worldview of the majority of people who are not in media. And that's where I think media, by not doing its job, is really, really letting down India's democracy. And coming here, I think there are like sort of four roles that Indian media is to play. One is, I think any media in any democracy is to play. The four roles being one of providing information. Number two, providing a forum for discussion, not debate, discussion. And three, of holding government of the day accountable for things. And number four, holding government accountable for the spending of public money. I put that separately as financial accountability. And on all four fronts, Indian media has failed phenomenally since 2014. As far as giving information goes, I'm actually stunned when I look at information on the collapse of the rupee, unemployment, MNREGA. There was a story that Business Standard did of rupees 100 crore per day was the per average increase in NPAs since March 2019. And this is a data-backed story. I think even Business Standard did not put it out properly. Forget about the others doing any kind of follow-up, etc. Whether it is problems on the Ladakh border, whether it is Manipur. I mean, we read Vijeta's stories, but she's one of the few people who kind of just talk about it. There is no follow-up. Earlier, there would be a rush for breaking good news. We'd be worried that somebody else is going to do it. Now I can just sit pretty with any news I have because nobody is interested in breaking it. Max, we may need to break it soon before they do the misinformation on it. So in terms of informing media, even the pink papers on the economy news are just not running it. There is new kind of terminology that has come in now. Instead of saying inflation has risen, they will say inflation has eased. Or they will preface everything by saying, because of international issues, this is what is happening, because of international rise in prices. So there are permanent kind of lawyers for the government of India doing that job. So as I said, our index for the non-journalist Indian citizen who's rushing to work and relying on the headlines, just scrolling on their phone or the newspapers, they're just not seeing that. They're just not seeing the news because it's not being shown. So each one of them thinks that their misery is a private misery. I'm miserable because, there's something wrong with me. It's the job of the media to join the dots and tell me that, no, you're not alone. There is an unemployment crisis, which is why you're not getting a job. Your brother's not getting a job. Your sister's not getting a job. But media has completely reneged on its job to join the dots and present a true picture. The second job of media to provide a forum for discussion, such as what we're having now, not debate. The whole thing, I think, starts with now making everything a point of contention. So at best, if you have to have a discussion, you'll make it a debate. Let's get a pro, let's get an anti. So you please say that it's not raining outside, and you please say it's raining outside. There'll be no arbitration or no discussion, no conversation where I can even see what people who are not in my filter bubble are thinking or saying, and vice versa. As a result, you have people who live in completely different kind of bubbles. So a lot of that bubble I know is social media put out and a result of technology. But to the extent that a prime-time television show can bring opinions together and allow for discussion, none of that is happening. All we see are hate debates. There is this organization called Kroor Darshan, they analyzed stuff in May 2022. They looked at 150 television debates, and they found that 138 were on Hindu-Muslim issues. There were 9 political debates with the anchor fully in support of the BJP, and there were 3 debates on sedition. I need not tell you which side the anchors swung on that. So think back on what the issues may have been in May 2022, but we are woefully kind of away from that with just peddling anti-Muslim hate. Actually, it's even wrong to call it a Hindu-Muslim debate. It's a very clear, targeted kind of thing that's going on. Number 3 is a question of accountability on asking questions of the government in power. Whether the Prime Minister cannot go to Mizoram for electioneering, or he's not gone to Manipur, or he's not spoken about what's happening in Manipur. It's a border state. It's a serious situation. It's the 6th month of continued lawlessness. If there were primetime shows at 9 o'clock, even twice a week, asking for accountability, you have a completely different picture panning out. But no, there will be no asking of accountability. We'll ask Rahul Gandhi for accountability. We'll ask Akhilesh Yadav for what's happening in UP, for the law and order in UP. There's a complete kind of almost inverted universe on going after the opposition for asking questions. No doubt one should be absolutely unscathing about opposition parties, critique them. But you flip the whole accountability job of a journalist, which it should be doing by questioning people in power, by questioning the opposition. Number 4 is a question of finding out what's happening to public money, how parliamentary committees, there are reams of that kind of, they conclude things. CAG, the kind of constitutional body which is meant to be looking at how spending is happening, the coverage of their reports is kind of abysmal. At The Wire, we did some stories about some very dubious kind of signs and scenes emerging from CAG. There was almost zero feedback. I think there was one Kerala paper that kind of followed up, but there's no comment on that. I think the New Indian Express did some RTIs in 2020 on finding out about how CAG's reports had dropped dramatically. So in the Manmohan Singh era, in Mr. Modi's predecessor government, there were about, I think, 55 CAG reports, which kind of came down to 14 in the period between 2015 to 2020. So let alone talking about this, we're not talking even about the RTI that talks about it. So there's no questioning on financial things that this government is supposed to be answerable for. They've spent more than 3,000 crores on advertisements since 2018, 2019 by their own admission. I think it's 3,024 crores. There is no kind of detailed going after asking where this money has gone, where it's coming from. If the Prime Minister is a brand ambassador for a Geo ad, which goes out as a full jacket, or that he's talking with certain industrialists, etc., there is no question asked about it. There is a whole lot of questions about Mr. Adani, the role of the regulator is so much in question, but there are no questions about the no questions being asked. So public money, financial accountability also. There is a deep sort of way in which media itself is failing its job of joining the dots and of easing and providing a good, healthy information for people to be more informed and to make their choices and to actually push the agenda of a progressive India forward. The third point really is, apart from what media is doing to itself, is of course something which has been extensively discussed, but I'll just put all that together, that when India is at the 161st position, and this is serious, out of 180 countries, you have Djibouti, Myanmar, Egypt. These are the countries that are worse than India in the 19 countries that are left at the bottom. And Somalia, and I say that particularly because Kerala was equated once to Somalia in a ridiculous kind of comparison, is at 141. India is at 161. There is a complete kind of a strangulation of media, which is sort of happening by putting in a whole lot of laws, by the digital rules, by saying that anything that PIB fact checks is the only fact, the rest of it will be taken down, combined with no press conferences from the Prime Minister. That sends out a signal. There's no single question answered by the Prime Minister since he took office in 2014. So people are scared of asking questions. I mean, asking questions is not the done thing. He did answer one question in Washington, and the questioner, an American journalist of South Asian origin, was trolled continuously. And these are not, what is really worrying is that these are not sort of mindless trolls who police the information space. These are people who are either followed by those in the highest offices in the country, or whose ideas and thoughts chime with what is being uttered at the highest level. So whether it is about policing journalists, going after journalists, particularly women journalists, and generally launching misinformation and disinformation, unfortunately, India presents a really scary phenomenon. And for a country our size, that has implications on the world. So we're waiting to see when the world wakes up to that. But there is a serious problem with sort of the misinformation levels that are being put out. And this is something that Washington Post did very recently now when they studied the Karnataka campaign and found about how misinformation, hate, and divisiveness is baked into a political party's sort of campaign, making it very difficult to fight either misinformation or to kind of demand accountability. That becomes sort of very difficult. So I kind of end with that, which is the thought that you may say that social media is very important, everything, of course, all very important. Twitter is very important, all this is very important, Facebook is very important. But what at the heart of it hangs that small news report. This is something that Gabriel Garcia Marquez acknowledged. And you go to any very high-flying political scientist book and you go to the index and you see it's based on some item on page 8 in some newspaper. So the role of the newspaper journalist, the digital journalist, the television journalist is important. If I was to come back to this, or somebody 50 years ago was to look at all the set of our mainstream legacy media today and see, does it tell us the story of what happened in India? It will be ultimately those journalists and their documentation, which will be the first, and in some cases, the last draft of history. So that makes our job like really important. And I think this is where we must kind of fight for a free media. Because this is not like I want Coke or I want Pepsi or I want Kit Kat. This is not like a commodity on offer on which there is a choice. A free media is central and critical to any kind of project of social reform, of preserving our democracy, preserving our sanity as a plural country, as a proud, diverse country that we know of. And that's why it's non-negotiable. And we must really put our shoulders to just make sure that this arc bends towards the right side of history. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seema. We actually missed you, but still you made the seminar completely enriched. സീമ പറഞ്ഞത് ഒരു എക്സിക്യൂട്ടീവിൻ്റെ അക്കൗണ്ടബിലിറ്റി ഉറപ്പിക്കാൻ ഒരു മീഡിയയ്ക്ക് കഴിയുന്നില്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ മീഡിയയുടെ പ്രസക്തി തന്നെ ചോദ്യം ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. എങ്ങനെയാണ് നമ്മുടെ ടെലിവിഷൻ ചാനലുകളിൽ ഈ ഹിന്ദു മുസ്ലിം ഇഷ്യൂ വന്ന് പോളറൈസേഷൻ സൃഷ്ടിക്കുന്നത്? പൊതുവേ ഇന്ത്യൻ മാധ്യമങ്ങൾക്ക് വന്നിട്ടുള്ള അപജയത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള ഒരു വിവരണമായിരുന്നു സീമയുടേത്. താങ്ക് യു സീമ. ഐ മീൻ ജോയിനിങ് us ഫ്രം പാട്ന. ആൻഡ് നമ്മുടെ സമയം സീമ ദീർഘകാലത്തെ പ്രിൻറ്റ് മീഡിയ എക്സ്പീരിയൻസ് അതുപോലെ BBC-യിലുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, ഇന്ത്യൻ എക്സ്പ്രസ്സിലുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പം വേണുവിൻ്റെ സഹപ്രവർത്തകയായി വൈറൽ എഡിറ്ററായിട്ട് സേവനമനുഷ്ഠിക്കുകയാണ്. അവരൊരു പരിപാടിക്ക് പട്നയിൽ പോയതുകൊണ്ടാണ് അവർക്ക് ഇങ്ങോട്ട് വരാൻ പറ്റിയിരുന്നത്. ബട്ട് ഷീ ജോയിൻഡ് us ഓൺലൈൻ. I think it was much more clearer than what we spoke. Actually, online, yeah, that's correct.